I'm gonna make sure to mute all my other devices. All right, and we're now live. I want to say, first of all, I want to thank all of the panelists that are here today on this Voices of the BBFG. These are regular recurring panelists, are very special panelists here. I'm joined tonight by my very special co-host, as usual, Stephanie Lyons, our mental health advocate. I'm also going to have our panelists introduce themselves here in short order. But tonight we're going to talk to you all on this special edition of the Voices of the BBFG about three topics. The first topic is going to be post-election fatigue. The second topic we're going to cover is going to be holiday blues and how to deal with and cope with the holiday blues as we're approaching to nationally celebrated holidays here in the United States. And then the last topic we're going to talk about is justice for Breonna Taylor. And so to get us started without any further ado, I want to have our panelists reintroduce themselves. They basically form the foundation, the value of this show, our mental health professionals. Want to bring them to the table, and we'll start first from the top with Katrina Landry.
Hi, my name is Katrina Landry. I am the owner of Renewed Hope Counseling Center, and we work with adults and couples, and we are all telehealth at this time.
All right, and then we'll go with her, not to be outdone, other half, Andrew Landry.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Andrew Landry. I am the CEO and founder of Where Men Hurt. Where Men Hurt is a place where men can come together and talk about real life issues in a safe, non-judgmental setting. We're currently meeting on Zoom Monday nights, 6:45 to 8:15, and that's it.
Thank you, Andrew. And we're going to move to Mr. Sabastan Moore.
As the brother Phillip said, Sabastan Moore, owner of Purpose Concierge Therapy, servicing the greater Houston area, primarily Katy, Richmond, Rosenberg, and I'm happy to be here.
All right, thank you, panelists. And Stephanie, I wonder if you want to add something to the introduction as well.
I am Stephanie Lyons, mental health advocate, and happy to be here. Always happy to shed light on those things that no one else wants to talk about. All
right. Well, again, I want to thank y'all. I know everyone's schedule was busy this week. We're going into the Thanksgiving holiday season, and we also just wrapped up a very contentious, or we're in the process of wrapping up a contentious election season. And for many of us who follow politics or who, engage in political discussions throughout the day, we've been locked in a 4-year administration that many of us, really didn't see eye to eye with. And then for the last 2 years, we've been following the election season itself. And there's been a lot of ups and downs. There's been a lot that has taken place in our community. There's been a lot of, information and misinformation that has gone through our community, and it's left us with a little bit of election fatigue. And so, I want to look to our mental health professionals. I know that you guys don't deal primarily in politics, but every now and again, politics bleeds over into, our emotional state. And so, right off the bat, I'm thinking about, we went through this last 4 years, these last 2 years, what do you recommend? How do you recommend that the Black community move forward, and all communities really move forward from this rough election season? And I'll toss that out to all of you, but really, coming out of any, event that the entire society has kind of participated in, how do we move forward together in situations like this, where we've almost kind of been at each other's throats for the last 4 years?
I personally think it's kind of a loaded thing to say move forward. I think we have to be very intentional about our word choice, because something like the experience that we've had where, we've had a wellspring of behavior patterns and belief systems and values come to the forefront that were, beneath the surface and well hidden for some time is not something that you can necessarily move forward from, because that is the reality of what's been there. And most of the time we're aware that it's there, but again, it's been beneath the surface. So now that it's up at the forefront again, you can't, quote, move forward from that because the season that we just came out of or coming out of and the mindset that has been uncovered as a result are synonymous. But what we can do is not necessarily carry the burden of that mindset. We don't necessarily have to, go into our daily lives with the expectation of fixing anyone, of changing mindsets, of, being confrontational, trying to get someone to, quote, see the light. Those are things that you may do during the election season where you're, debating the issues and trying to help someone see because now, one voice, one vote, that type of thing, and you're trying to do your civic duty to some degree. But now that that particular part is over for the time being, it may be that discretion is the better part of valor, and that would be the closest thing to moving forward we can do.
Because that's what I want to do. I want to straighten some folks out, right? And I immediately want to, rub it in their faces, and and then the other part of me catches myself and says, okay, well, that's not who you are. You didn't want them to do that. You didn't want them to behave that way. So obviously I can't behave that way. But you said something that was key, and I think that the others are going to chime in, but hopefully we can touch on this. Is that, a lot of this was below the surface for so long. And we interacted with folks that we didn't know that felt the way that they did until, we got, 45 in office. And so, I'm still curious, how else should I proceed? How else should I move on? Katrina, Andrew.
I think one of the big things to think about is how can you rest in this space, even if it's for a moment. And I think if we talk about the amount of energy that we've had to expend just within this last year, just in general, but then regardless about the election and then the different racial tensions that's happened, I think give yourself some rest, be around people who are going to be supportive of you. And that when you move, when we talk about moving forward, you know who they are. Now a little bit more who's among you. And so you kind of govern accordingly. I recently had something that happened, not necessarily race related, but it just reminded me, when people show you their hand, play the card accordingly, play it accordingly. And I think with that part, this is our opportunity to show that we can respond differently, meaning we don't have to respond with hate or with frustration or with I told you so, or you need to get, not that kind of response, but a response that says, hey, let's find some ways on where we can agree, where we can unify, and then for those areas that we can't, then protect self, right? Protect you, protect others in those spaces. But I think that we're just so tired that there's a time that we have to kind of break from engaging in so much of it, that if we don't, we will start responding out of that fatigue as opposed to more rational, intellectual responses, and then it starts to breed more friction, right? We can see those from some of those rallies that came out, right? It was like people were coming and they were responding out of their emotion. And so, yeah, we have them. And yeah, we would probably prefer, hey, some people came out of the woodwork, so we didn't know we're going to be like that. So I'm sure we've hit some with some surprise, but I'm sure that we've probably been around it a lot long enough to kind of recognize and kind of see some of those. And so you're going to have to probably distance yourself from some people, just because the way that they view and there's been some tough conversations that I individually have had with some people, and it's made me really think about how I view them, how it changes my relationship with them, and because we do want to feel like this person that we are in close relationship is our advocate. And if they're not, it can change a lot of how we view it. And I think one of the things I had shared with you guys before was, I'm biracial. And so one of the things that's a struggle, I've talked with some other people, like, what do you do when one culture of yourself kills the other culture? What side do you take? What side do you advocate for?
I've never heard that like that, Katrina. That's hard to hear. That is hard to hear. Can you expound a little bit more on that for those of us that don't have that struggle?
Well, I think it's the part of, we hear, and I'm not speaking for all biracial, but I can speak from my experience and probably a good chunk that I've spoken with. For one race, you're not white.
Mm-hmm.
When they see me, they're not going to say, here's this white girl. They're going to say she's Black. They're not even going to say she's mixed. They're going to say, that's a Black girl. For Blacks, you're not Black enough.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
For whatever reason, whether it's my vocabulary, my skin color, my hair, whatever. Mm-hmm. So there's a part of it that, and I think we had shared before, I had the conversations with my dad who said, society is going to see you as Black and you have to work harder. It didn't come from my mom. My mom doesn't know that conversation. Mm-hmm. But when people see me, they see me as a Black female. I identify myself not as biracial, but as a Black female. And it's not to discredit the other side. It's to say, the whole world was the other side. Mm-hmm. 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 When we were taught in school, it was the other side. It was in my neighborhood, it was the other side. All of that was the other side. And so when we struggle with having the part of where are your allies? Where do you stand? Where is your fight? It can be tough. And so, yeah, you want to know that people that are alongside you, and when they're your own family members that maybe aren't your advocates, what do? Because that's tough, right? And so having to have those tough conversations of, how do you see me? How do you support me? And does that change the dynamics of our relationships? And so we're having to have those kind of tough conversations. And sometimes you do need a break from that. Sometimes you just need to be around people that you can be yourself and that are your advocates, and that you can kind of break from it, because it's a lot.
Mm-hmm. I know that post-election for myself, it's been, I work in oil and gas, and I work for a French company versus French-based company versus a American oil and gas company. And so the environment is a little different, although they're all for, pro oil and gas, naturally, it's more of I've worked for other oil and gas companies in the past that were American, and clearly when someone wins, it's for their side, you feel it. Like someone told me that that works in oil and gas as well, is that they see the little huddles that go on, in the office, for the people, that were pro-Republican versus Democrat. And so, there's a lot of hush, going on, and the huddles and the lunches and that kind of a thing. So it makes it really thick, to deal with. And I mean, I don't know if you guys have any suggestions as far as that's concerned. I mean, I know that's where I've felt it in the past. I don't feel it so much this year, but it's there. It's there, it's everywhere.
Yeah, I think for me, politics has never really been one of the top priorities, except for these last few years. I've become a little bit more involved. One of the things that I struggle with is taking it personal. How could you feel opposite of the way I feel, or how could you pick somebody opposite of who I pick? One thing that I really gained insight is that they have every right to pick who they choose. People vote their interests. So if you're oil and gas and American oil and gas, then one candidate is a better fit than the other. And so I have to learn how to not take it personal, recognize that everybody has the right to see it from their vantage point. And it doesn't necessarily make it wrong, and it doesn't make mine right. It just makes them different. And so the moving forward is coming to a place of understanding that people can be different. And just because we all look alike, don't mean we have all the same interests. Just because we, go to the same church, don't mean that we all have the same beliefs. So we have to be, I think Sabastan used a good word, intentional about being able to see both sides and trying not to take it personal, even though it may seem or come across as personal.
Can I say something that may be just slightly, I won't say inappropriate, but it's real. So do you feel like, sometimes I feel like we as people of color want the peace more than others, if that makes sense. And so we're a lot more tolerant. I don't know if the word is tolerant, but we'll look for ways to navigate that kind of peace. When others are just straight up, just nasty and have no problems, putting that out there. How do you deal with that? People that are just really like in your face and there's no getting along with them. And sometimes, let's be honest, sometimes, we get tired of trying to be, the peace mascot, I mean, at what point do you just say, you know what, I just don't care?
No, I agree with what you're saying, but I think that's one thing that my wife says to me a lot, but I hear her say it a lot, is you're only responsible for yourself, right? So I'm only responsible for how I respond. And so I have to be mature enough to understand that the fight is not really personal. It is a belief system. And so that's where you come into the place where you can tolerate it, or you can, we're designed to be peacemakers. Even if you look in the Bible, it say, seek peace and pursue it. So a part of our responsibility as Christians is to seek that peace. And so, is it a bad thing? I don't think so. Is it, sometimes burdensome? Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think I want to piggyback on that.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, very briefly, I think one of the things that we forget sometimes, because I think we oftentimes want a seat at the table, to, loosely quote Brother Dunn, whereas we have the resources to not only make, but to call people to our own table, thereby making that effort of the type of peace that we're talking about secondary, right? And so you can still have the peace and interaction and positive and all that kind of stuff, but the motivation behind the peace generally is to obtain some type of momentum, to obtain some type of privilege, some type of right, some type of opportunity, that is in the control of the people we're trying to keep peace with.
Mm-hmm.
If we are in control of our own, then it changes the dynamic of how we feel we have to interact. That's my 2 cents.
I think when we talk about boundaries doesn't make us an aggressor. Boundaries doesn't make us not a peacemaker. And I think that sometimes we get those mixed up. We think that if I establish boundaries, or like if we use the example for you at work, right? If I establish that I'm not having these kind of conversations, or I'm not allowing you to communicate with me this way, doesn't make us the aggressor, and it doesn't make us not a peacemaker. It kind of goes on to what Sabastan was saying. It's about how we're conducting, or what kind of peace we're looking for. I think the other thing is, I heard this years ago, and this has probably stuck with me through a lot of stuff, that you stop communicating with people who are committed to not understanding you. And so when you're having, regardless of whatever it is, if you're in a dialogue and they're committed to not understanding you, you do yourself a disservice about how much energy you give to them. And so there becomes a point in time where you decide you can believe what you want to believe, because that's where you're going to stand. I don't have to give my energy to that. And I think that's where we kind of what Andrew was talking about earlier, those dialogues and those belief systems. The truth is, no one person is all bad. I mean, if we're going to be honest, most are not all bad, right? And so if I like 6 things about this person and you like 15 things about this person, does this person make your person better than my person? It goes back to, there may be some things that are likable or that works well or that they are well at in these areas. And this is what I like about that. But it doesn't necessarily negate, both are present, I guess is what I'm saying. So, we can have a very smart intellectual person and they could be rude. Both can be present, right? And so I think that that's the part where if we're unwilling to be able to see the person in the totality of it, take what we can take and then leave what we need to leave, but just not giving the energy of someone who's not committed to, someone who's committed to not understanding.
And can I add, because I think where, for our community, where we experience some of the hurt and the disappointment is whenever there is any recommendation of policy or legislation that would benefit or correct the condition for our community, there's all this backlash. And never, or very rarely is there a rallying of support from other communities. And so I think when we experience that, that to me, it suggests that there's more bad than good in some people. And I think that that's very disappointing. I'm trying, like Andrew said, though, not to take it personally, but it's hard to when, someone supports, a leader who, says the most horrible things about your community and who has said the most horrible things about your community. It's kind of hard not to take that personal. So I'm working on that piece, Andrew, and I'm glad you being that shining light, for us and really kind of, pushing us in that direction. But that's just one of those realities that, every time I see it, I try to engage it and strangle it out of people. This is not something we're making up.
Right, and like you said, this is everyday life. How do you deal with it when it's not just an individual, but it's a group of people that are impacting the way that you live, and what you can have and the education your kids can have. And it's, in a one-on-one situation, you say, okay, you can distance yourself because you're not committed to understanding me. But now we're talking about a movement, a mass of people. It's not an individual. It's not just something you can just say, I don't want to deal with you, bye, Felicia. You can't do that, I mean, it's...
But there are people, and not to sound overly optimistic, like what we're talking about is not a real concern, because it is. There are people who do want to understand. There are folks that we can have those conversations with, and so we have to choose the battles effectively and more efficiently. And sometimes we, like Katrina was saying, we're exhausting a great deal of energy trying to convince someone who is unwilling to be convinced, and or we want to try to change a group think, which by definition you cannot change a group think because it's connected. Everyone is connected in that, right? We're sharing a commonality. And so for me to have a different perspective takes me out of the group think. But there are people who are saying, hey, I don't understand. I have questions. And that's how we change the dynamic through that one person. And, what comes to mind, and this is a 1,000 years old, but with Jackie Robinson, though the situation was to a degree driven by profits, right? Because Branch Rickey was a businessman. That's no denying that. But was the only owner who would even consider. And so that one person being willing to understand or open a door changed the dynamic of how that particular industry ran. And so it's not that we have to change everybody's mind, but there are key people who are also willing to have a better understanding, who we can enlighten about our experiences, that are either able to change things, impact, influence, and or put us in touch with people who are or supporting of us if we are in fact in position to create changes, right? And it doesn't take, so I guess my thing is it doesn't take everybody to be on your team to make a difference.
Seek out that person, not the group, but that individual.
Right.
Because we fail to realize that influence is a big thing, right? Like it's the same thing. So if we're not trying to, it's not everyone, it's the one, similar with it's in the Bible. He left so that he might win some, not necessarily everyone, right? And so I think if we stay within if we work within our community, or community works within their community, that's what makes it the bigger part. And I think we're seeing so many different groundbreaking things, whether it comes from African Americans or whether it comes from females. Things are changing. It's a tough change. And when you're talking about years of mentality, it's a learned behavior. And so we can't undo it. We've been spending years trying to undo some things, and that takes generations to do that, right? And so you're starting to see the trickle down effect of some of those changes, where there's more of an acceptance, there's more of groundbreaking things as far as what places women are in, what places African Americans are in. The opportunities are opening. We have to be prepared for it, and that also means that we can't be in a place where our intelligence gets us somewhere, but our emotions keep us from staying there. So we can still be in that space. We can be equipped for it, but because we're still wounded from some of the things on how we've things have happened to us, we bring that into the boardroom. We bring that into these conversations, and so then the struggle becomes the things that we're trying to undo or change. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer to process that.
That was hard to hear too, but thank you for that.
And I think everybody brought some pretty solid solutions to the table, for this particular topic. It brings us to this next topic on the holiday blues, which is something that me and Stephanie talked about in kind of pulling together the show. And you think that folks can just kind of move throughout the year unaffected by changes in the season, changes in family status, work status. I think right now some 20 million Americans that are unemployed that otherwise wouldn't be. We've got COVID, we've got election fatigue, we've got all of these different things, and then our community has a special set of factors that we can apply to our mental state, so to speak. But then we get into the holiday season, and COVID has brought about, I think, some 250,000 COVID-related deaths. There will be people, at the dinner table this Thursday without a loved one that was there last year. There'll be people celebrating, Christmas and Kwanzaa and Hanukkah without their loved ones. And I wonder if you all can kind of give us some guidance on, the holiday blues, that term. I don't know if that's a real medical term or not, but we do know that that is a real condition that a lot of people face every single year.
And the blues, just in terms of grief, there are different types of, I looked at this today and found that there were different types of grief and different layers to grief. So maybe you guys can start us off with that to be able to recognize, because I think a lot of times, especially in the Black and Brown communities, we're used to dealing with grief. Grief is a part of our tapestry. And so we mask it very well. From, I was thinking about today, it was talking about, people that drink, too much at the holidays, and for me, it was, I remember my, uncle, and he drank too much and he started singing and dancing, and we're thinking he's having a good time without really looking at that and saying something else may be wrong. And sometimes it's a good time, but sometimes it's masking for something else. So if you guys can just, maybe we can look at things in a different way instead of actually, just kind of brushing it off, maybe take a deeper look and be able to recognize what it really is. So.
Yeah, I don't know that we, that's something that's just, left to the holidays, that type of thing, that type of awareness we should be, implementing throughout the year, because these are habits that are exacerbated during the holidays, not that are isolated to the holidays.
Well, a lot of times we don't see them though. We see them once or twice a year, So we really should be in, checking in on people regularly, but let's be honest, we just don't do that. So when you see 2 or 3 times a year, you think they're okay. Well, they always act like that, I mean, that's who they are.
Yeah, and we don't give enough credence to thinking beyond the surface. It's a good time, and that's probably where we cut ourselves short quite often. it is just a good time, or, they grown, they can do what they want to do, and not necessarily giving thought to, the motivation, because truthfully, the motivation is the real issue. You can say, oh, I'm having a glass of wine, but why? And if that's, if it's because I don't want to feel, well, that's usually something without, a shameful plug. That's something that you should work out in therapy, and if there is a why, and there's always a why, if we know what the why is, then that's how we determine if it's a cause for concern or not, if it is just a glass of wine, or if it is just, a party, if it is just cutting loose, or if it's a venting or release, which in some cases could still be healthy, right? But we just cannot, put a tagline on it and call it the holiday blues and think, but those feelings are real. But those feelings, again, I just kind of want to reiterate that that's not something that starts, in November. Those issues and those concerns are happening throughout the year with people, and those people who do see them throughout the year. Are those folks being supportive? Are you being supportive of those folks that you have questions about? Are you allowing people in your circle to hold you accountable and to ask questions without being defensive? Are you honest enough with yourself to recognize that you are, in fact, being defensive? So these are kind of layers to trying to address the problem where, ideally you would say, hey, Uncle Tony cutting up again, we should probably have an intervention. Uncle Tony got, Brother Paul, or whatever the case may be, from January to October, and Brother Paul ideally should have been saying something to it, and Uncle Tony should be, real enough to say, you know what, this is what's really going on. Let's have a conversation, and that's stuff that you can't fix in 2 months. You can't fix with fruit cake. You can't fix with a couple of gifts. That's stuff that you have to work through. And again, that's going back to what we talked about last time. That's that whole generational thing where we've been taught, you go to church, you pray about it, and you wash it away. And that's the end of it, versus saying, hey, I have to do the maintenance on myself.
Otherwise, it leaks out later on, and you think that you left it at the altar, and you find that you didn't. They say pick it back up, but you never left it to begin with. It needs to be dealt with. It needs to be processed. Anyone else?
I want to, this sounds like it goes without saying, but it's okay to not be okay. And I think that sometimes we have to remind ourselves of that part. The Mourner's Bill of Rights is a really good one to kind of allow ourselves that we have the right to feel, to have, to talk about our memories of the person that we've lost, that we have the right to have a ritual, to celebrate this person. We have rights for those. And I think that for anyone who may want to look that up, it's the Mourner's Bill of Rights. And that's something that we can try to remind ourselves. We have the right to feel. We have the right, what they call grief bursts. They seem to come out of nowhere. And so I think when we're dealing with firsts, those are hard. First holidays, first birthdays, first anniversaries of their death. Those firsts are really tough. And so making sure that you have a support system, those who know people who have lost people, and this is especially their first, check in on them. And don't take it personal. Don't take it personal if they don't want to respond very quickly, or if they seem like they're withdrawn, because it's hard for them. And sometimes people don't know how to express grief. And it's hard for those who are trying to support those who are grieving, because they don't know what to say either. And so they feel like they say, oh, it's going to be okay. And they're like, no, it's not. So it's not downplaying it. You can feel. You're hurt today. You can be hurt. You don't like the world today. That's okay too. It's not diminishing that. And I think that we call it, I'm trying to make you feel better by saying you're going to be okay, or in time, blah, blah, blah. And that's not, that doesn't help the person in the moment. They logically may know that, maybe, but when you're talking about like that complicated grief, that's that prolonged grief. That's that grief that's lasted for extended period of time that we've now become much more difficult to move through. And those can cause some significant impairments in relationships and work, and those kinds of things. And so we do want to be mindful of that. There's a book You can get it in a book or you can get it in a CD, and it's called It's Okay to Not Be Okay. And that's definitely been something that's been helpful for some of my clients when they've dealt with grief. And again, this is their, I'm with Sebastian. It's the shameful plug. It doesn't matter who you see as long as it's a good therapist that works for you. But it's to say therapy is important. I mean, that's your space to be able to gain tools, to have the space to share, that that space to not to just be. And I think that we've had that's present, that's real. And you start to see that when you interact with people at work. You start to become short-tempered, you are irritable, you kind of have difficulty in concentrating, you may forget things. And so when we're talking about changes in behaviors, spouses feel it, family members feel it. And so having that support system, what do you need? Who do you have that you can list, that will listen to you? Who do you have that's going to help you, who's going to help you laugh when you need to get that pick me up? Who's going to be there who's going to let you snot nose cry, and they may cry with you? And who's going to be there that's going to say, okay, you've been here, but we can't stay here. And that's a gentle nudge, right? Because we can feel, but we don't want it to be consuming. And so you got to have those different kinds of people there in your support system, because you're going to have that. And so I had one client, I was telling my husband, one of them texted me and said, hey, I finally got a flower, which happens to be for their mom's favorite flower. And they said, I finally got one this year. And those are the times that we as therapists live for our clients to say, yeah, they got it. Like, they're still hurt, they're still sad, but they're able to still move in that. And so that's just an encouragement to let people know that, yeah, it's rough, but we're here to work with you, to journey with you as you have those things. But no, you got to have your support system, and it is hard. And you can cry, you can not feel like being bothered with people, but just be mindful to not completely isolate.
And there's something else too. I think that people, because we're talking about, someone at the dinner table that may not be there, but there are all types of grief, as you guys know. So there are a lot of people, we've talked about domestic violence and, couples not getting along. And so there are a lot of people that are going through COVID, divorce, empty nesters, all at the same time, people that have lost, people that have lost, unfortunately, people that have lost their children. Just the other day, there was a news story, a story that unfortunately made the news. And I know the family that just lost their daughter. This Thanksgiving will never be the same for them, tragically. And so, sometimes I think, when you're talking about that, do you have a person to be this and to be that? There's a lot of shame that's involved. And when you deal with shame it will keep you a prisoner. You just want to literally dig a hole, jump in, go to work, come home, and not do anything else, and just fade to black, So I think if maybe talking about or asking, how can some of us effectively deal with shame to be able to let people in to begin with? Because if you don't get rid of the shame, you're saying, well, do you have this person and that person to be accountable? But shame will lock the door. No one will ever get in, So that's one thing. And then you were talking about, people that have lost someone, you're going to be okay. What can you do? I found that sometimes, especially, in the example with this family that I just spoke about, sometimes all you can do is just be present. You don't have to say something. I think we feel like we have to do something. I know as a woman, I feel like I have to be busy and doing something, to prove my worth or my value is based on how much I can do, but sometimes I think just being a presence is enough. Sometimes there just simply are no words in the English language to express the sorrow that people feel. And all you can do is just be present. If they want to talk, they can. If not, like you said, they can, snot, cry, or do whatever, and it stays here, So.
And I'm glad that you all talked about those solutions, because I found myself having to resist the urge to tell people, hey, cheer up, it'll be okay. This too is going to pass. When in that moment, people are really in some pain. And then I will compare that against my own pain that I experienced whenever I lost a loved one close to me. And I didn't want to just cheer up, right? I wanted that family member, at the table. And
And it
so
dumbs it down. It kind of belittles it and dumbs it down and makes it real.
it does. It minimizes that pain.
Yes, it
for that
does.
person. Yeah. And so I'm glad to hear that we should walk that person through the pain instead of, forcing them to stop walking through that pain. So, I really appreciate, that guidance that you all have brought. And actually, in a couple of minutes, we're going to be joined by some additional panelists. And we're going to talk about justice for Breonna. But until they all get here together, we want to kind of put a bow on the holiday blues. So what are some last parting thoughts that you all would have? And I know, Andrew, you have a men's conference that's coming up in December. And it's going to focus on, basically building a better man. But I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about your conference that's coming up in early December.
All right. So December 5th, 2020, we're going to have a in-person and virtual men's conference. The title of it is Where Men Hurt. And in the conference, we're going to address different areas where men hurt that typically we don't talk about or we don't get instruction on. So we're going to look at the area of where men hurt with physical health, where we hurt with finance, business and career development, also where we hurt with vulnerability and transparency, where we hurt spiritually, where we hurt in relationships, and where we hurt as men becoming whole in the role of mentorship or becoming remanned. So we're going to address those topics. We're going to have some panel discussions, allow men to be able to ask questions after the speakers. And we're excited about it. I think we had the conference last year was amazing. And so we're looking forward to another one this year.
Awesome. And then where can I register for the conference?
So you can go to Eventbrite, just type in Where Men Hurt and they'll pull it up, or on Facebook, my Facebook page, Where Men Hurt. And you can register there. We have spots for vendors also if somebody has some product that they want to display. And so, come out and visit with us.
Okay, that's perfect. And we'll make sure to share that along with this video after we end tonight. I want to jump, or at least kind of introduce the next segment since Camille Scott has joined us. And we're going to touch on the Breonna Taylor situation that took place tragedy, not situation, that took place in Louisville, Kentucky. Breonna Taylor, of course, as we know, in early March of 2020, was sleeping in her apartment with her boyfriend, and a group of armed police officers executed a no-knock warrant, didn't identify themselves, and broke into the apartment, shot and killed Breonna Taylor. Boyfriend shot back and wounded one of the officers. The boyfriend was originally arrested, but later all the charges were dropped once we got into the thick of the investigation. But at the end of all this we were all left with a tragedy where a young Black woman who was a public servant, who served her community, who wanted to do more for her community, her life was lost. And as time unfolded, we learned more about who Breonna was. And then we also learned more about the system that caused the loss or the tragedy. And so with us tonight, we're going to have a couple of folks that are going to help to tell us about some of the things that we should be doing as a community in order to help drive justice for Breonna Taylor, and then also ensure that we have justice in our community anytime an event like this occurs. One of our guests tonight joining us is Camille Scott. She's a community justice advocate along with Julian Robinson. We also have one more person that's going to be joining us. We'll announce them when they get here. Stephanie, I wonder if we have some additional comments we want to make before we ask Camille and Julian to chime in.
On which subject?
On Breonna Taylor.
I know that, like yourself, the whole thing has just been a tragedy. We're all Breonna Taylor. I think that's the scary part for me. Being in the safe haven of your house, I don't care if it's 4,000 square feet or 3,000 or 300 square feet. You know, when you're in your home, you think you're okay. And just knowing that something like that happened the way that it did, it can happen to anyone. And I know myself as a mother, um, hmm, I can't imagine. I just simply can't imagine. So I guess that's where I take it personally. The haphazardness of it,
Hmm.
just the way that it's been handled, the sloppiness of it,
Mhm.
is just, I think, something that we really need to take seriously and feel like that we have some ownership in it. Because if you don't, it'll come knocking at your door as someone that you know.
Right. And I'm glad you said that, Camille. Julian and I talked last Friday night after the ABC special. Actually, Julian said he couldn't finish the special. He was so upset about it. But I wonder if you all could share your thoughts on what you've seen in these last couple of weeks in regards to Breonna Taylor.
Well, this is Camille, and I must say that I've been traveling, and I've had some personal issues with. My father died of COVID late May, and I'm transitioning to my mother living with me. So I've been going through that personal kind of situations. So I must say that I've been really focused on that, and not in the last, I'd say 2 months since I think Phil, since we talked, and Stephanie, maybe about 3 months ago it was, that happened. My father died, and everything with my mom. So I'd have to say that with me, it's the back burner issue. You know what I mean? With the election, with COVID, it's this is like the back burner issue. So how do we bring it back to the forefront? And we have to just let people know that, yeah, COVID is still an issue. The election, the transition is still an issue, but this is still a very relevant issue. And I think it's marketing, kind of marketing it to making people know that, you know what, this happened to this woman, and it can happen to you. You know, it can happen to your loved one. And I worked in a newsroom for 20 something years, and I know how news cycles work, and COVID and the election are the majority of the attention. But we have to do something to shake it up and make Breonna and people like her the attention again. And we have to figure out what that is. We have to figure out what that is that makes it okay. CNN is now, they were 24 hours election, Donald Trump, debates, you know, him not conceding, and now it's again back to COVID. How do we bring Breonna back to the forefront? And that's what we have to figure out. And I hope we come with some ideas tonight to really get that back in the talking points of the media.
Well, and before you chime in here, Julian, I guess, Camille, with that being said, I don't want this to sound gruesome, but, you know, I've heard if it bleeds, it leads. So
yes, that I mean, sadly, I learned that in journalism. You know what I mean? But there's a different mindset as well as trying to bring important issues back into the forefront of community. So, you know, and with our young brands, and I know we never really pulled a trigger to it, but, you know, we need to figure out how to best, and it needs to be, how do I say this? It needs to be bigger than what we've planned. It needs to be bigger, because to knock COVID and to knock what's going on the election off the lead story, it needs to be bigger. You know what I mean? And I don't.
Can I just share a little bit about, Camille just brought up an initiative that I think our community should definitely get behind. And one of the companies that operates out of Louisville, Kentucky is called Yum Brands. And beneath Yum Brands is several restaurant chains that basically benefit from an environment where young Black and brown men and women can be gunned down and there are no consequences. And if we are to live in this environment, everyone should feel the pain. And part of that initiative is us withdrawing our dollars from some of these businesses until such time that we see meaningful legislation changes and other equitable actions taken to ensure that this type of tragedy doesn't happen again. Camille's leading into it, but we definitely need to develop it and put some more production around it so that it can be effective and it can become that news story that says to America that, hey, if you don't do right by us, we can take our almighty black dollar somewhere else and maybe even keep it in our community and see how that does. And then Camille also led into something else as well, is that, this tragedy took a back seat to a lot of other things. And it's almost as if, the media didn't care about it. But then also our community was comfortable with it taking the back seat. And, it reminds me of that scene in, 12 Years a Slave, where Solomon was hanging by his neck on his tiptoes, and everybody was walking by, nobody stopped to help him out. It's because we become conditioned to this type of tragedy, and it's no longer a shock. Whereas in any other community, they'll shut down, for 3 and 4 weeks and not spend a dollar with the mainstream community. So I looked to our mental health professionals in that regard, but then I also wanted to bring in Julian to, just kind of talk about, some of his feelings after watching a little bit of that ABC News special on Breonna Taylor last Friday night.
And do you feel like that it's possible that maybe we were okay with it because after they got paid, I guess there was a settlement? Do we feel like that was some kind of, I don't know, vindication? What do you think, Julian?
Maybe for some, it may have been a vindication or enough for them because they saw, well, they got something, but it doesn't replace a life. It doesn't replace a life. And that's the main thing that was bothering me, especially when I watched the special on Friday, was that I saw no value of life, especially when it came to the police officer, those surrounding the case. I saw where, even though, and this is the things that bother me, even though you were performing your officer duties, you took a life, but I saw no remorse whatsoever for taking a life. It seemed as if he only was pointing fingers to the boyfriend, the ex-boyfriend. They should not have had her in that situation. No remorse at all for what he had done, in quote unquote, in the line of duty. And I think to me, it really shed a light on how much they do not value her life, how much they don't value our lives. And so that's what the disheartening portion to me was about, was where is the value of life? And as they went on with it, I was really interested in hearing when they talked about the investigation. They were saying even with the ex-boyfriend, there had been no history of violence. And I was like, well, if there was no history of violence, then why did y'all go in so heavy into her apartment? And they had already captured him, already arrested him, but they still went heavy into her apartment when there was no history of violence. And then also, they must not have found any drugs in the area because they would have said there were drugs in the apartment. So if you were going in there, what were you going in there for? So it was really disheartening how they really, tread over her name, tread over the boyfriend's name, tread over the whole situation, and still, like I said, show no remorse at all. So,
and to add insult to injury on the remorse, then he's now suing her as well, right?
Yes.
So
yes, he's suing.
Add to that no value. Not only are you of no value, but now you're like sub-value,
Right.
Negative value.
Yeah. And it's just very disheartening to see that being displayed. Because like I say, I understand that you're a police officer. I understand that you feel like you have to do a job. And the thing is, well, he shot first. The thing is, well, we had reason to believe there were drugs in the apartment, and they feel vindicated and justified by those reasons, again, when they found no drugs in the apartment, he was he was not there, and he was the ex-boyfriend. He wasn't the current. So there was no reason for them to be even going there. Again, it goes back to the value of life. You see, the police officer outside shooting into the apartment with no line of sight. It was just horrific. And as I agree with Camille, Phillip, I do believe it needs to be bigger. It needs to be bigger than what we've designed. I mean, social media is good, and what we're planning is good, but it does need to be bigger because it has to get back into people's minds and people's hearts again, so that everyone will come together and unify to take action, because action has to take place. And we know when it comes to these companies, the main thing they care about is their dollars.
Mm-hmm.
They care about their dollars. Yeah.
So Camille, as a media specialist expert, if we're looking, 60, 90 days out into the future, we've got an inauguration coming up, we've got, holidays. It's almost like, we know that the pipeline is full with news and future news stories. When's a good time to place this? Not that we need to announce it here, but how should we strategize on?
I personally think we should come up with like what the bigger campaign is and come out really hard in February. And I say that because the holidays are going on. People are distracted about that. The whole transition is going on. People are going to be distracted about that. COVID cases are on the rise. People are distracted about that. So unless something huge happens that we can piggyback on, and I'm sorry to say that huge thing is going to be another tragic death. And
I was hoping you wouldn't say that, Camille.
None of us, but none of us wants that, right? But that's going to be the huge thing, right? That gets people's attention. And sadly, if that happens, none of us wants that to happen, but we know what life is. If something happens, then we need to be ready to say, okay, this happened, it's a tragedy, and we've been working on this, and this is what y'all need to do now that we have your attention. And again, nobody wants that to happen. But if nothing happens, we need to work on February, because we need to wait for after the inauguration, because you see, Trump is he hasn't even conceded yet.
Right. So it might be February.
But what I'm saying is, we could be looking at them dragging him out of the White House on January 20th,
right,
the inauguration. And then what happens the week after that with, so what I'm saying is February, I think, is our next opportunity.
Right.
So maybe if we can answer the question, what I think people become distant because they're saying after so long, what does that have to do with me? Maybe if we can answer that question, maybe that will give us the answer, and make it relevant again, pushing it forward.
And
I think that
all of us are Breonna Taylor. It doesn't matter, Black man,
Phillip,
woman.
you said that, and I think we should change I'm not really even sure what we settled on. I have to look back, Stephanie, at what we settled on, but I like that. We are all Breonna Taylor.
Oh, in the middle of the night, all of us are Breonna Taylor. When your baby is in the bed, we're all Breonna Taylor.
We are all Breonna Taylor. Yeah,
there are hidden warrants for all kinds of things that people don't know about. And the police can just show up at your house,
but this is the case. This is the case. Other cases you have, well, he had a warrant. Well, he did this. Well, he did this. This woman was sleeping.
Right.
We are all Breonna Taylor.
Yes, we are.
So I think maybe something should be rebranded as that, with everything else that we have. We are all Breonna Taylor.
And I'm glad that you said that, because I want to bring in the mental health professionals back into the discussion, because I feel like there's some block that prevents us from seeing that. And whether it's, just being disengaged or being, conditioned to this type of tragedy, how do we break through that block to recognize that we are all potentially Breonna Taylor?
That's you know, you have a knack for asking these very complicated questions. Because that too is one of those scenarios where you say, where as from a human nature standpoint, not just a community standpoint, we tend to minimize things until it gets a lot closer to home, right? You know, there's all kinds of illnesses and diagnoses that a person can have, and it's like, oh, that's so sad. It's a sympathy card, but it doesn't turn into empathy until it comes knocking at your door. So it's really difficult to say, you know, how do we, quote unquote, as a whole, break down the barrier and become more intentional and more aware of what's going on. I think we're all aware, but do we have the emotional connection to the situation that is required for us to mobilize in the way that we're discussing? That's the real question. So are we aware of how that group of people, what their Breonna Taylor would be?
Well, and maybe it may not be, you know, so from a female standpoint, I am Breonna Taylor. Maybe for some reason the men can't really like feel that, but I know every man needs to be a protector. He wants to know that he's, you know, strong enough, you know, to act and react, you know, in the moment. But the boyfriend, he wanted to believe that too. And please forgive me, what is his name again? I can't think right offhand.
I'm not sure, but I would go back to Sabastan and ask, what do you mean what our Breonna Taylor would be? What do you mean by that?
Well, I'm simply suggesting that there are scenarios that we've all had that hit close to home that, you know, register with us on a personal level. And because this is a quote news story for some of us, we unfortunately do not make that connection. So we have to, if we're going to do anything, right, it would help us to be able to find what this group of people, this community, this subsection, what that scenario was like, what person, what friend had a similar experience, whether it was the same end result or not, to help us galvanize and say, hey, even though it was not exactly the same for your friend, it could have been.
So you're saying the I am Breonna Taylor, if we made that a campaign, it wouldn't resonate with certain people. Is that what you're saying?
It would definitely resonate with certain people. And, you know, to personalize, we would want to personalize it for those people that it doesn't.
But, oh, okay, but no, okay, I'm trying to understand. You're saying that I am Breonna Taylor campaign would personalize it with certain people, but with the people that it wouldn't resonate with, you're saying we should try to find a connection to them. Is that what you're saying?
We making sure that they understand that they are in fact Breonna Taylor as well, that this is a real situation that could happen to them. And that would essentially what we're talking about is that intellectual connection versus that emotional realization. Intellectually, we all know what happened. Right. Emotionally, we're not all tied to it. So we have to make that emotional connection for everyone to want to take the steps necessary.
Okay.
No, I agree with that. I agree. And I'm glad you said it. And Stephanie, to answer your question, the boyfriend's name is Kenneth Walker. And I think all the men on this panel, you know, we would lay down our life for our wives, for our family. And I know, Julian, we have a friend that said, you know, his dad preached a sermon that, you know, if anyone disrespected his wife, I think he said even God himself wouldn't be able to keep him from putting his hands on.
So he won't be misquoted. He said that he said that if anyone disrespected his wife, God better get to him before I do.
Before I do.
And I wanted to kind of piggyback on that. I think that part of the messaging too should be from us saying, you know, that we have to take the responsibility of protecting our women. You know, Black men need to take more responsibility of protecting our women. And when I say this, they don't have to be our wife or our sister, biological sister or biological mother, but have that ownership to say, you know, we're here to go. We're gonna be your protector. Realign ourselves with the mindset that we're family, we're connected, we're community, and it is up to us to do something about being there for them. And really repairing that breach. And I'm glad that we do have the mental health professionals here, the counselors here, to kind of help even discuss how that would look for us, because I really think that's a big thing that needs to be repaired, our relationship between the Black man and the Black woman. So.
Mm. I see Marcus is on there. I don't know, Phillip, if you want to bring Marcus back into the conversation.
Marcus, appreciate you joining us. I know you've been pretty lined up this afternoon, and I wanted to know if you could just share your perspective on the Breonna Taylor case and sort of just some of the shared ideas that we kicked around on our community's path forward and how we should address some of this in a movement.
Yeah, the Breonna Taylor case is, falls in line with all the other stuff, right? With everything, same thing we've been dealing with since the Tamir Rices and the Trayvon Martins, and even beyond that, the Amadou Diallo, and here in Houston, the Clarence Bradley and the Ida Delaney's is nothing new. It's been happening for decades. And if we go back, we can say it happened even longer than that. This case is an opportunity for us to do something different, to have different things done, or to create different results. One of the things that I've talked about this case is that it has striking similarities to two other cases that shows you where race, it makes a difference. There's a police officer right now in Minnesota that's in jail for murder because he shot a white woman accidentally responding to a call. And they charged him with murder. They charged him with murder. Why? Because she was a blonde-haired, blue-eyed white woman, and he was a Black man. And on top of that, he was Muslim. And everybody know you cannot shoot a blonde-haired, blue-eyed yoga teacher in the United States of America as a Black man. Get off. But he's in prison as a result. They charged him with the crime. Very similar. In Houston, we had the Hardin Street raid, where a white couple were in their home and the police officers broke in and they murdered two white people, husband and wife, man and woman, who actually had drugs in their house, not the drugs that they were looking for, but they actually found cocaine and marijuana in the house. The officer in that case was a Black male who is on trial now, charged with murder. So the Breonna Taylor case is an opportunity for us to prove the racism that exists. And it's also an opportunity for us to emulate to the fullest what we adore so much. We love the movement that we refer to, the 1960s. We love to talk about Dr. King. We love to talk about how unified they were, how strong they were, how the power that they had and that they flexed. And we love to emulate them by, we march in the streets, we hold rallies, we pick up signs, we protest. But there's one component that we have failed to put in place that was a very, very successful part of the movement in the 60s, which was withdrawing economic support. As I shared with some of you already before, if you go back and listen to Dr. King's speech, you'll understand why he caught a bullet the next morning. Because Dr. King stood flat-footed and broad-chested and told Black folks to take your money out of white banks and put them into Black banks. He told them, if you do not support our community, the white companies, then you will not get our dollar. And he told Black folks to stop buying Coca-Cola, to stop buying Wonder Bread, to stop going to A&P grocery store. And that affected those companies. And there's a very intentional strategy that they put in place to target companies until they got the result that they needed. Even they often, and in the case what we're talking about right now, if they could not target the one company directly, they would target an associate in order to get to the company they were trying to get to. And so that's why I think we have an opportunity with the state of Kentucky by withdrawing our economic support with people who are doing business as usual in the state of Kentucky. I remember on the show that was on the other night, one of the things that stuck out was when the guy was talking about who Kentucky is. We are Kentucky. We're home of the Kentucky Derby, and we're this, we're that. And I was like, yes, you are the state that refuses to arrest the killers of Breonna Taylor. And so I think we have to speak not just to the city of Louisville and not just to the state of Kentucky, but the people who are doing business as usual in the state of Kentucky in order that they may work as an ally to bring about the change.
You know, Marcus, I'm glad that you brought this up, because we've got some mental health professionals on the panel as well. And in order for us to effectively do this as a community, there must be a huge commitment on the part of the community. And Bob Johnson, formerly owner of BT, he says that the Black community can do this, but there is a mental block from preventing us to move forward with such a change. And I'd like to know, you know, what from our mental health professionals, what do we need to say to the Black community that if we have to sacrifice for 381 days or more, and I say 381 days because of the Montgomery bus boycott, you know, what is it that, how do we make that compelling case to our community that unlocks the mind so that we can push forward a movement like this?
Are we asking for a short answer? Because that's a whole series, right? I don't. There you go again with these questions.
I can help out, and he can come back and give the technical answer. I think part of that block, which happens, is a block in life for individuals, and it can also be the same block for communities as a whole. One, quite simply, is a lack of faith, right? There's simply a belief or a disbelief that we have the capacity to do such a thing, to work collectively, to do a collaboration, and to have it actually, yield the results that we want to have it to yield. There is just flat out a disbelief that it is possible, and part of that disbelief comes through how insurmountable the task may appear. But the other part of that disbelief comes through not having witnessed it before, right? There are things that we have not witnessed, and as a result of not witnessing it personally or firsthand or in our lifetime, we don't know that it's possible. And there's a lot to be said about seeing something and then taking on the belief after you see it. I can go from the 5-minute mile. I don't know if you know the story of the 5-minute mile, where it hadn't been run before, and then all of a sudden one guy ran it, and then over the next 5 years 500 people ran the 5-minute mile just because they saw it, right? And I can take you from there all the way to Thomas, right? He said, I'm not going to believe until I can put the hand in the side. And so there's a lot to be said about the development of faith through seeing. So one is having the faith to make it happen. The other is the fear, right? We're afraid of what people might say. We're afraid of what might happen to us. We're afraid of the comfort or the discomfort that may come with it. Phillip, when you say something like 381 days, do you know how much fear that strikes in folks? The idea that I may have to give up Pizza Hut for 381 days, the idea that I may have to give up Taco Bell for 381 days, the idea that I may be the object of ridicule, like some of us were when the NFL protests were going on. Oh, you crazy for doing that, man. I'm gonna go ahead and watch the NFL, watch the game. Right. So, when you take those two monsters, the fear, the lack of faith, and the amount of fear in this, and you find little ways to give people faith, and you find little ways to knock down fear, those small victories, I think that's what leads to the success. I hope that answered your question, Phillip. Now, the professionals can give you, the lingo and the language, but that's my two grits. Not 2 cents, my 2 bits.
I think my husband had said this before, that just in a different conversation, that there doesn't seem to be a unified voice, that not one particular leader. And so I think that sometimes there's an inconvenience that may be there of having to give up for an extended period of time because we like our comfort. So I think there's an inconvenience that may be there, but I think there also is this trust factor of, can I trust whoever's leading us into whatever it is that we're doing? I think we've seen as a country that we're willing to pull together. I think we've seen that. I think we've seen as a country that we want to move in unity in that. So I think that we see that part. I think the struggle sometimes is in the way we do it. You have conflicting views on how we handle that. And so I think that maybe if we can find more of a unification on how we handle those, I think you'll see that people may be a little bit more apt to working with those things. Because again, if we have one group that's doing this and one group that's doing this and one group that's doing this, there's less of a unification that's there. And so it becomes a little difficult to understand or to know which one we want to trust, which information we get. I think there was something that went out that said, oh, well, this company supported this person, and then come to find out they didn't support this person, or they did. And so I think when you're talking about wanting to unify, that you want to make sure that it's in the form of being able to trust those who are leading.
Can I speak on that, Katrina, real quick? As I mentioned, the concepts of faith and fear, and Rev, you'll appreciate this. The old preacher in me got to bring out the third F, which is the falsehoods. And there's a fallacy in our community that the 1960s that folks were and I'm not saying you, Ms. Landry, I'm just saying what a belief in our community, that there was this unified people, that there was this one voice, that there was this one message, and that is just it's a fallacy. It did not happen. And I tell people all the time, you got to find the folks that's going to roll with you and ride hard. And if you do it long enough, you do it well enough, you do it with the utmost integrity, then folks will jump on board. But this idea that there was one voice, one message, you had folks who fought Dr. King in the back of the church. You had folks who, Stokely Carmichael and Martin King shouted different messages while marching in the same parade. There were a number of
talking about back then. I mean, I think when I'm making this statement about now, we're saying, how do we move forward differently? And so if we're talking about, maybe it wasn't that way back then, but I'm saying you can see that people are looking for unity. You can see that. So I think that whether you see that in how we did the marches together in different places, I that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that there's a fallacy or about back then. I'm saying that in 2020, I think that as we're moving forward, we're looking for the unification to move together as a group, not in every single thing, but overall, we're looking for that unity, that we can feel stronger together, that we have that commonality of belief systems and how we want to move forward.
When you say overall and when you say we, are you referring to the African American community, or are you referring to the people that are on this Zoom?
The community.
Yeah. And the reason I brought the 60s up is I use that as a reference because that's part of where we draw a lot of our information. And what I'm suggesting is it's not going to happen. I know we want this unity and this everybody to be on one page, but history shows that it's not going to happen. It's not a reality. What we're going to find is there are people that are going to see what we say, hear what we say, believe in what we say, and they're going to work in concert. And there are people that are going to shit on it, point blank, period, and go in a different direction and think this is a dumb idea and think that another direction is what should be done. Similar to the NFL, to the NFL boycott. You had this division, and the people who were for it just had to roll for it, and the people who were against it just had to roll against it. I agree it would be great. I just know that the likelihood of getting a unified effort
So,
it's-
so then what are some of the possible answers? And I hear what you're saying. Everything that you guys are saying is the truth, but how do you get people on board when it seems like, Marcus, the message is damn to hell before it starts? I mean, how do you do that?
But no,
What's the answer?
you got to get enough. Meaning getting enough is enough. Getting everybody, it is highly unlikely. Getting enough folks is likely. I don't know if that makes sense or if I just made it more confusing.
I think it kind of does. We spoke about that in the mental health segment. I think if you're saying the same thing as Sebastian said, you know, the key is not to trying to recruit or to try to convince everyone, even if it's just that one person that has the power to make some changes or that's willing to listen. It's that person that you go to that can help you affect change instead of you trying to take on the big task of changing everybody or trying to change a group. Is that kind of what you're saying, or Sebastian?
That's exactly. I'm saying, you know, we deliver we deliver the message. We open the doors of the church, and those who is theirs to accept or to reject. And our job is not to fight against the ones that reject, but to take the people that accept and keep on moving.
Right. I like that, almost like a closing point there. We've come to about the last 5 minutes of Voices of the BBFG. This is actually the last one for 2020. It's because we want to get out of 2020 alive. So, but we want to start off 2021 fresh and with a good start. We want to go into the holidays. Wish each and every person on this panel a happy holiday season. And just hoping that everyone can leave us with a good parting point to go into the holidays with, whether it's on mental health, holiday blues, you know, post-election fatigue, or justice for Breonna Taylor. If you could, everyone just kind of round table, you know, leave us with some good thoughts over these last 50 days. And let's go into the end of the year with a positive send off.
I'd like to start. This is Camille because I have to jump off. I'm actually in Florida. I mentioned earlier, my father died. This is November, 5 months ago. And speaking of mental health, I've had my own struggles with mental health, especially after my father died. But and I'd like publicly, not publicly, but in this forum to give a shout out to Marcus, because Marcus is that kind of guy that if I don't answer his phone call twice, he says like, don't make me come to your house. That's Marcus. So we need more of that, right? Yeah. And that has helped me. And it helps me stay focused on just being healthy. So I think we need more of that. And I mean, we're all, and I think that when we are at this level of, you know, intelligence and professionalism and entrepreneurism, that we always think that we're strong and we can do things by ourselves, but it helps to have someone like that in, speaking for myself, in my corner. So I just think we need to do more of that with each other.
Very nicely said, Camille. Very nicely said. And I guess, hello?
Go, Stephanie.
You there?
Oh, okay. I couldn't hear myself. I couldn't hear anyone else. Just to kind of piggyback off of what she said, and that was very heartfelt. I had said earlier that I knew a family that lost a daughter that made the news this week. And we were saying that sometimes there's nothing to say, that there is sorrow and hurt. And I don't think anyone on the panel hasn't gone through something this year with COVID. Personally, you know, I've gone through as well. You know, we're talking about empty nesters and divorce and COVID, and that's all me. And with that being, you know, said, sometimes there are no words in the English language to describe the sorrow. And that's where I remember my grandmother saying, sometimes all you can do is moan. And there's sorrow so deep, that's all you can do, if you can get that out some days. So you are in good company. And sometimes a presence is all you need. There are no words, but just a presence like Marcus. They'll say, hey, not gonna let you do that, and we deal with shame, and shame will lock the door to you not picking up the phone. But it's good to have people that are tenacious like Marcus that won't let you get away with it. So congratulations. Hats off to you, Marcus.
Now, I'll close by saying that this is who we have to be for each other, individually, but also as a community. I think what we're describing about individuals can also be described for our community as a whole. Because collectively, what we've experienced as people with melanin in our skin is traumatic, and it has caused a collective disorder. It has caused a collective amount of depression, and we act sometimes against our best interests. And so we've got to be there for one another individually. But I believe that there are people like this crew that's on this line that has to understand that we got to be there for the rest of the community that is, attempting to do harm to itself. So I'm just hopeful. I'm thankful for the folks that are on this line, and I'm hopeful for all that 2020 has revealed to us, because I believe 2020 has been a revealing year. That's my opinion. It has been revealing. What we do with that revelation is on us. And so I'm hoping that all the stuff that we have seen, all the things that we have experienced, all the layers of the onion that have been peeled back to where there are certain things that not even white America can deny anymore. It's revealed a lot. And most importantly, it's revealed that racism is ever present, it's real, and it ain't going nowhere. It's going to be here. We just got to find a way to overcome.
Sabastan and Julian.
I have to kind of piggyback off of what they both said. We are community. It is up to us to support one another. I'm not looking for someone to ride in on a white horse and save us. It's for us to lift up each other and push and boost ourselves. It's our job, our duty. It starts with us, and when it starts with us, it needs to become infectious enough that it spreads from us to others, to where we all get the mindset, hey, I'm going to lift you up, you're going to lift me up, we're going to keep each other accountable, and we're going to continue to move forward. I think that, as Marcus said, 2020 has been a revealing year. I know a lot of people started off the year talking about 2020 vision. Well, a lot of us have improved on 2020 vision and opening up our eyes on seeing some things that maybe we hadn't seen before, or getting some better focus on some things that we were uncertain about, and now we have clarity. When you add 2020 together, you get 40, and biblically, the number 40 is the number of testing. And so we also have experienced a lot of testing in this year. And so, and although I don't think we're done being tested, I do believe that at least the folks on this line have overcome some tests and are ready to show forth that you have a testimony now to share with someone else on how to make it over some hurdles, to keep moving forward, and again, make that moving forward journey infectious to others. So
I'm gonna have to steal some of that.
Hey, look! I was about to tell. I was like, Julian, if you stealing my sermon, you got to give me part of that tithe. But then you brought it on home with that 40. Well, I'm using that. I'm telling you now.
No, Marcus, I think I'm gonna use it first.
All right. What if we could hear from the Landrys?
Go ahead, babe. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Andrew.
All right. Well, I'm going. I think the thing for me, I think this is a great platform, and I really appreciate what you're doing, Phil. One of the things that I tell the guys that we meet and Where Men Hurt is 3 things that I tell them, and I will say that to this crowd too. The first thing is we have to stop focusing on making a better yesterday.
Mm.
We have to put our eyesights on what's the future and how do we take steps to go forward. The second thing I tell them is we have to quit being a public success while failing privately. We have to get to a place of transparency and vulnerability so that we can get the help that we need in order to accomplish the things that we have to accomplish. And then the last thing I always tell them is to be intentional about reaching out to someone every day. There's a segment of the population waiting to hear what we have to say. And we have to be intentional about reaching out to people, whether they're grieving or whether they're just people that cross our minds. And that's what I was up with.
Sorry, I gotta tweet some of that. I just want you to know, if y'all see that, I'm gonna tweet some of that.
My 2 cents is to give yourself some grace. I think that this year has been a lot. We are tired mentally and emotionally. And so, and this is not going to be completely contrary to what you guys have said, but be mindful of what you can take on yourself. While we're trying to be there for others, be mindful of how much we're absorbing of other people's things. And if we need to go get help so that we can kind of pull that stuff off of us. So while we're being there for, since we're all in the scriptures and stuff, so I talk a lot about loving yourself as you love others. And we often think that as I'm going to love you the same way that I love you, that I want to be loved. But I look at it as love you at the same time that I love me, as same time. And so how can you love yourself in this process as you grieve, as you deal with being fatigued, as you deal with life circumstances? How can you love yourself at the same time that you're loving others? Because you have to include yourself in loving. And so give yourself some grace when you are tired or when you need a break or when you need self-care, and be okay with not being okay. I think as our community in general, we feel like we can't feel, we feel like we have to just kind of move past however it is that we have going on. Allow yourself to be in that space, have a good support system, be a good support system, but just to give yourself some grace this year, because we've had a lot going on. And we need to be revived and to be regrouped and restore. So allow this next couple of weeks that we can to try to be intentional of how you can love yourself at the same time that you're loving others.
That's good. That's good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, those are all valid points, and I don't know that I can add anything of substance beyond what you guys have already said. I just want us to be encouraged as far as how we approach and how we address these things that we talked about that are suppressive in nature, whether it be policy, whether it be business oriented, whether it be community action or lack of community action, and not to take on that mindset, that groupthink that we mentioned earlier. Because ultimately, you kind of have to be mindful of matching energy, because we talk a lot about matching energy, but in order to match that energy, that means you have to carry that energy. And I think that's contrary to what we're trying to do.
I'm going to be selfish, and I'm going to give Stephanie the last word. But before I do, I want to wish, all the panelists here a very safe and happy holiday season. I do hope that you all come back refreshed and ready to do this as often as we can in 2021. To the folks that are listening and engaged tonight and who will listen down the road to this video, I wish you the same as well. If you're a supporter of the Black community, the Black business community, I do hope that you take this opportunity to go out and buy Black at least 3 times a month. If you're going to buy Black during Black Friday, make sure to at least consider 3 Black-owned businesses in your purchases. If you can do that, we can start the process of changing some of our behaviors. And then, of course, changing some of our purchasing decisions, which can lead to a whole lot of other changes in our community. So have a happy holiday season, a good start to 2021, and I'll turn it over to Stephanie to close us out.
Well, I pretty much kind of gave my spiel after Camille, but I will say this, because we were talking about the Breonna Taylor case and how we can affect that change. and we were talking about Yum Brands. And I'm gonna pronounce that again, because if you say it too fast, you think it's Young, Y-O-U-N-G, but it's Yum, Y-U-M Brands. And under that are KFC, Taco Bell. I think it's called, what is it? KFC, Taco Bell,
Pizza Hut.
and Pizza Hut. And so if you want to affect change and you believe in if you believe that you too are Breonna Taylor and you're outraged, take some of those dollars, as Phil was saying, and if you buy from them 3 times a week, and you want to start to pull back, make it only twice a week, and then turn around and give that dollar, invest that dollar back into the Black community. Go to Frenchie's instead of KFC. Find somebody else, a caterer, somebody else that you can patronize, and that's the way that we can start affecting change and putting the dollars back into our community. So that's one. The other thing is, I am very grateful for everyone's participation. When I started doing this, or I came to Phil with this idea, I guess earlier in the year, Phil, maybe March or April, it was really just to, again, affect change, to have a forum, to talk about solutions. This is not a complaining session. We don't bellyache. That's not what we're doing. We bring relevant issues to the forefront, and it's a think tank. We're about solutions. So I just really appreciate everyone's cooperation. I'm hoping that it will indeed affect change. We can start again next year. And if there's, I guess, anything else that anyone else would like to bring, to the forefront next year, we're excited about it and to see where it will go.
All right. Well, everyone, I really do appreciate it again. Appreciate your involvement all year long. Looking forward to doing this in 2021. And with that, we're going to close out the show. So until the next time we talk, remember, it's our time, but it's up to us. Y'all have a good evening. Thank you.
Happy New Year. Happy holidays and Happy New Year.
Now too.
Take care, guys.
So consistent.